if we are not being in relationship inside of ourselves, if we are not being in relationship with our bodies, in relationship with, our emotions and all of that that is stored within our bodies, then we are actually doing the very thing that oppressive systems do to us, which is exiling us, disappearing us. And so it is so, so critical. It is fundamental, using, the language you brought in. It is the foundation of creating safety, is creating safety within, creating a home within.
Saludos and welcome to the Rematriating Borikén podcast, where we discuss the journey to the essence of these islands, this archipelago and her surrounding waters, the restoration of our essence before conquests and continued colonialism, the reclamation of our collective healing and liberation. I am Yasmin Hernandez, creator of CucubaNación, artist, writer, activist, born and raised in Brooklyn, Rematriating Borikén.
Well, Natalie, it is so good to see you again beyond our Trinchera de Ideas that we did back in January of this year, called From Disruption to Belonging. And it is such a necessary conversation, considering your work, what you do, the resources that you provide to our community, that I felt it was necessary to have a follow-up conversation, and a more broad one that we could share with folks publicly, virtually. Y por eso, if you could just share a little bit about yourself, the work that you do, this beautiful book that you published. There's 2 books actually around the pain we carry. And just tell us a little bit about your background and your journey before we jump into this conversation on From Disruption to Belonging.
Thank you, Yasmin, for having me again. I love holding and being in these spaces. And I've just appreciated also everything that you've brought to our community. I just want to say that, right? Feels just important to amplify your work as well as support one another. So I am Natalie Gutiérrez. I'm an author of 2 books called The Pain We Carry, the first one is Healing from Complex Post-Traumatic Stress Disorder for People of Color. And the second one is Heal Racial Trauma. I always forget my second title, Heal Racial Trauma, Reclaim Ancestral Wisdom, and Ignite Your Soul's Liberation. And both were written in Puerto Rico, with Puerto Rico in mind and heart and in spirit. I really feel like, our ancestors helped me to channel what needs to be given and offered to the world. Not that I'm a savior, but that I see myself more as a guide, and also someone that's also healing from the very things that I write about, right? Like, I haven't arrived at any sort of place where I'm healed. I am still healing from these very things. And so I'm an author of these 2 books. I've been a therapist for we're in 2026, so I want to say like 17 years now, if my math is mathing. I've been a therapist, a trauma therapist, for 17 years. And so I really have dedicated a lot of my energy and skills to supporting folks of the global majority specifically, that are really trying to heal from the soul wounds of colonialism, the impacts of colonialism, the impacts of racism, individualism, white supremacy culture, patriarchy, classism, the isms that keep giving and burdening us in this world, and to really get our people to reclaim themselves. Because a lot of the time we have or struggle with our sense of self, and we're carrying a lot of anxiety, depression, and even some physical ailments in our bodies, right? And a lot of it is rooted in the impacts of displacement, of colonialism, of the transatlantic slave trade, and just so much of the historical trauma that still lives in our lineages and in our bones, and how it just causes so much disease within us. I mean, and just so many other ways. There are so many ripple effects that we need like 100 more years to talk about. But it impacts our people. It impacts Black people, brown people, indigenous people. It impacts Latine, Asian, Arab. It continues to impact each and every one of us in so many different ways. And you know, us living in Puerto Rico, and me having rematriated I think in June, it'll be 2 years that I rematriated to our islands. It impacts us, and I see it every day. And it also has impacted me. So I would describe myself as like a student of life, as a student of my own work, as a survivor of colonialism, that we are survivors of colonialism. I'm also a mama. I'm a mom of two beautiful little people that really are my teachers. That Yasmin, you got to meet when they came to our space with me, and they're like, "Ja, mommy, I'm tired of hearing you have this conversation." uh, but that in a nutshell is me.
Okay. Well, I think that they may think that they're tired, but there's this osmosis, even if they tune out during your conversations, that I very much, well, I was going to say I hope, but I actually very much know is going to spare them of so much of the healing that we've had to do, right? That every time we make the commitment to heal ourselves, then there is trauma there that doesn't get passed on to that next generation. And the importance of that. And that doesn't just go for us as parents. It also goes for us as adults that are the village raising just the next generation, whether we be aunties or tios or just our friends' children or whoever it is. So that goes for everybody. But I'm glad you started with this concept of the body, right? Because in jotting down notes, if I'm looking down, it's because I have these notes here, going through my notes from our conversation from January. Where I wrote down some of the things that stood out to me. And one of them is this theme of body and homeland. So we discussed being at home in our own bodies and body as the original homeland. And so my question is if you could speak a little more to that concept of body at home, feeling at home in our own bodies. How does this relate to feeling safe, as you talked about being connected to our own selves, and also what is the importance in any healing work? Like I would think that that's fundamental to healing.
Yeah, I believe that. I believe it is very fundamental to healing, because I think that in this world that we live in, our bodies are being attacked. Our very existence is under attack. I want to say so much of the time, but there's a part of me that wants to be like, all of the time, our bodies are under attack. And it's not just, it's primarily from, you know, these systems that are racist and oppressive and continue to perpetuate many cultural isms, right? But it also impacts us. And sometimes we perpetuate those very things onto other people, right? Sometimes there's that term, internalizing the oppressor. Sometimes we do that. Sometimes many of us, you know, have done that. We internalize the messages of oppressive systems, and sometimes we become oppressors. And that all lives in our bodies. The messages, they live in our bodies, and we go into environments. We absorb the energetics of that environment. That stays in our bodies. Historical trauma speaks to us in our bodies. It's cellular memory. It's blood memory. It's alive within us. And, you know, I'm not saying that we are all traumas walking around, right? But what I am saying is that we are still impacted by things that have happened many years before us, right? That our ancestors were forced to survive, forced to endure. That all lives in our bodies. So when I think about what home is, part of it is the external, yes, but all of it also needs to be how we feel safe inside of ourselves, because we can't run from ourselves, right? And it's important that we are also enjoying the company we keep when we are alone in our bodies. Our bodies are these temporary vessels that really just move our soul through different timelines, I believe. And so if we are not being in relationship inside of ourselves, if we are not being in relationship with our bodies, in relationship with, our emotions and all of that that is stored within our bodies, then we are actually doing the very thing that oppressive systems do to us, which is exiling us, disappearing us. And so it is so, so critical. It is fundamental, using, the language you brought in. It is the foundation of creating safety, is creating safety within, creating a home within, especially as many of us see that in the external home, our lands also, have occupiers. There are occupiers that are living on our land. And so we want to make sure that there are no occupiers living within, that are existing within us, right? So that relationship with our bodies and with ourself, with our soul, is critical. It is fundamental.
I love that. I love this layering of, I see that there are some people that speak to the homeland, speak to freeing Puerto Rico, for example, but that we don't see this sort of nationwide or pueblo-wide concept of speaking to freeing ourselves as a people and liberating in terms of healing ourselves, right? So that gets externalized as well. So I love how you talk about that. We don't want occupiers within us. And sometimes those occupiers are like our own critical voices, right?
Absolutely.
That come from, whether it be from lineage, whether it be from the abuela speaking, whether it be the criticisms of our parents, of the colonizer, and it can be layer upon layer upon layer. So talking about it as homeland, and this is sort of touching upon your journey, but I love this part of your journey, and I'm going to ask you to speak a little to it. But you mentioned the teachings of Aloha from your time in Hawaii. And I think that that's so important to connect how Puerto Rico, as a colony of this U.S. empire in 1898, and how many colonies were taken in that year, and the experience of Hawaii. But if you can just speak to that, those lessons that you picked up on, having had this beautiful experience of living there, of being there.
Yes, yes, yes. Ooh, oh my gosh. I want to straight up call myself in and say, I went to Hawaii like a little colonizer. And what I mean by that is, I was born and raised in New York. And, in New York, we're very like, little drill sergeants in a way. Like, we are just super speedy. When people are taking their time making our meal, we're like, what are you doing? I gotta go. And so I went with that attitude. I arrived with that attitude to Hawaii with this sense of rushing. And so people, walking down the street, taking their time, and I'm like, how New Yorkers walk. So I'm like, doing this, giving myself like 5 minutes to grab lunch in between, grad school, because I was in grad school out there. I was doing where I did my master's. And I remember being like, hurry up, hurry up. I have to get to, my class or whatever, not allowing myself enough time and expecting other people to, for my emergency to be their emergency. And people walking too slow, da 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 da. And I really learned the importance of actually slowing down, and that sense of rush that I had. While yes, I want to honor being on time to my class, but that's my responsibility, right? Like, that's my responsibility to give myself ample time so that I can arrive and just be on time and not and see things a little bit differently. Be open to a different culture and way of life. And I really feel like living in Hawaii actually made me a better Puerto Rican. It actually really made me a better Puerto Rican because, I very familiar with our island. While I wasn't born and raised in Puerto Rico, we were coming every year, like twice a year at least. And we would stay for a while. I have so much family still out here in Puerto Rico. So I feel very connected to the culture. And there was something about having to be on my own, not knowing anyone, and really being educated and humbling myself to be educated on a different way, to actually enjoy life through that, aloha energy, that aloha spirit. And so being in Hawaii and learning about the history of Hawaii too, like being educated by natives there, by locals there, of like, hey, this isn't quite okay. Or one time I remember I took sand from the beach because like you in Puerto Rico you just take sand from the beach, right? And I learned. I had a beautiful, lovely friend. I have a lovely friend who called me in then and was like, no, no, like we don't take from the land without asking for permission. And I was blown away. I was like, oh, wow, right? Like, because they know what it's like to be in reciprocity with the land and to respect the land, right? To be in right relationship with the land. And I didn't learn that then. I didn't know about that then. And so I learned how to actually be in right relationship with the land by living in Hawaii from locals. And I brought that with me to New York, and I brought that with me, here to Puerto Rico. But I really feel so much gratitude in my heart for the people of Hawaii who really took me under their wing to actually teach me how to be a good human being.
I love that. First, I love your vulnerability in sharing. This is something that I carried with me as a person from New York. Something that we often don't talk about as Boricuas. We talk a lot, again, about free Puerto Rico, decolonization, for those of us that are wanting that, because, well, when I use the term Boricua, in my mind and in my spirit, that's what I am meaning. But we know that there are some of us who are wanting something else. There are some of us that are not necessarily thinking that we must colonize, or unfortunately, those of us that are still wanting to approximate to the colonizer, and different layers that are realities that we have to work with. Pero I do feel that those of us who are coming back here or coming to live here for the first time, as I came here to live for the first time, I had never lived here before. Many of us are bringing this sense of entitlement that comes from being a person from the US. The pace you mentioned, in our case, both of us being from New York City, and we may not be checking that part of us because we think that we are coming here with such love for this place that we don't always have room in our minds to admit, oh shit, we have the colonizer pulsing through us. So there's a conditioning to expect others to respond to what it is that we are needing without considering what we are giving first. So I love that you've mentioned all of this. I think of so many cases of going out to eat y la gente comentando, pero ¿qué pasa? Where's our food? Yo, the food's going to be cold. But there's no consideration as to hay una mesera, there's one waiter and there's like 50 families here, right? And just that part missing. So I just love how you could have had that experience before arriving here, and how also you had these loving teachers in a kindred land, right? Taken so similarly, taken as naval stations in 1898 when the US was still relying on coaling stations for its navy, trying to police the Panama Canal from either side. We were taken from over here with Cuba, they were taken from over there in the Pacific. And so beautiful that you could bring those teachings from Hawaii here to Borikén. Thank you for sharing all of that. estoy yendo like to some of the concepts that you shared and some of the slide concepts that you shared. This is one that I have quoted a million times in my own journey coming here. Esto de no ser de aquí ni de allá, the limbo.
Mm,
As I
mm-hmm.
call it, I have said, yo soy del charco, because I have felt so alien in both places. And maybe in 12 years in, I'm starting to align more here. But I certainly feel out of it with regards to Brooklyn, with regards to New York. I feel like so much has gone on there that I feel further and further distant. It's always in my bones, it's always in my heart. But if you could just speak to
Mm.
your experience with ni de aquí ni de allá, whether personally or whether some of the folks that you work with that speak to this concept of unbelonging everywhere.
Yeah, I think it's a little bit of both. It's definitely my experience and also a lot of the people that I serve, because a lot of the people that I work with are part of the diaspora, whether it's the Puerto Rican diaspora or, the Dominican diaspora or the Colombian diaspora. There is a collective experience of like, I'm from this place living in, the United States, and or at least I'm from it in the sense I was born there, right? But that's not our native land. But I was born here and I know people and I have community and it raised me, right? Like for me, New York raised me. I feel like there's a New York Puerto Rican dynamic. And you kind of know, like, you can kind of know who is like a Puerto Rican from New York, right? You know that. Because they're like just this mannerism or way of being. And part of it is that we're very happy to be Puerto Rican for the most part. I imagine there's sprinkles of us that don't feel that way. But for the most part, there is a real deep pride, rooted in the fact that we couldn't always be. We couldn't always tell the world that we were Puerto Rican. We at some point we couldn't even wave our flag, right? And so there is this sense of like you're living in the United States, right? But you're not quite white enough to to really fit in, right? To really fit in. But when you go to your isla, wherever it is in the world, whether it's Puerto Rico or Colombia or Dominican Republic or Ecuador, wherever, you also feel like you're getting some from some of the locals there, from locals meaning people that were maybe born and raised in Puerto Rico, right? That some of them who may never have even visited the United States, where there's a sense or a sentiment that you aren't Puerto Rican enough, or you are de afuera. There's that term, right? Oh, tú eres de afuera, tú eres de afuera. And it has good intention, I think, maybe depending on the context of the person who says it. It's just saying that you were kind of born out there. But I have to admit that there's definitely a part of me that's like, pero soy de aquí. Soy de afuera, sí, nací afuera, nací en Nueva York. But we also know that New York is responsible for the bandera Puerto Rico, creating the bandera Puerto Rico, right? And salsa and all that. But anyway, so I'm like, New York is like little Puerto Rico, you know, parts of New York, like Spanish Harlem and Elias and all of that stuff. It used to be anyway, before the gentrification. But there is that like de afuera. I am outside. I am outside no matter where I go. And if I'm in the United States, I'm an outsider. If I am here in Puerto Rico, I'm an outsider. And I think, that does sting. I'll speak for myself and for the people that I also serve. It does hurt us. There is a feeling of like, where do we go? Like we forever have this experience of living in the limbo, not quite fully being able to land anywhere. And, that brings up emotions, that brings up confusion, that brings up sometimes a disconnection with your own identity, because it's like, where do I land? Where do I land? I'm like, I feel like sometimes I'm in this plane and it feels like, in some ways I'm a hybrid. I'm a hybrid. um, and and I think even though that kind of division is exactly what or how systems that perpetuate colonialism, how it thrives. They thrive off of this division. They thrive off of even the language. I remember one time I was maybe like a teenager, and I had my cousin. I had two cousins. One was married in who shared with me. So I said, I'm Boricua. They're like, you're not Boricua. You weren't born on the island. You're New Rican. You're not Boricua because you weren't born here. And while I totally understand the distinction, because yes, we have differences, but that's also true in people that are born and raised in the island. We're not a monolith, no matter what, whether you were born in the island and raised, or whether you were born in New York or the United States, whatever. We're not a monolith. We're not like all the same. But I remember them correcting me in that, like, you're not Boricua, you're New Rican. Your grandfather was born here, so he's Boricua, but you're not Boricua. And I remember being like, damn, like, that's such a separation and division. And what a beautiful way to feed colonial systems when we do that. And that's exactly what they want.
Right. And I find it upsetting that we would be told who we are, right? That we are not given the authority to define ourselves, but that we are going to be told by others who we are. Um, One of the more insulting questions that I get is, ¿pero te sientes boricua? Right? So,
Mm,
and I say insulting porque me insulta, but ironically, the person will be asking it from an innocent place. And when I say an
mhm,
innocent place, because they just cannot fathom, how could you possibly feel boricua if you're not from here? Or my other experience has been coming here, and either people see my art or have heard me present on something historic, and they're like, how do you know that? Like how do you have access to that information? How is it possible? How is it possible for you to love this place in that way, no habiendo nacido aquí? And then I realized that
mhm,
it's more about their own need to get that consciousness or understanding than it is about queriendo robarme algo, right? That I already have.
mhm.
You can't take it away because I already have this.
Right, right.
But it's, you also describe diaspora as not as a choice, but structural dispossession. And I think that
Mhm,
that is the part that people fail to see, because a very painful thing that I've learned from the New Rican poets is, and reading their work, is that a lot of us in New York were born as children of the migrants, right? So it's not even a choice that we made our own selves. But
right.
there's this sort of like distinction, like wanting to blame us, like we chose something else. And even when we choose to come, there's still this need to separate. So if you could just speak more about that idea of diaspora as not a choice, but structural dispossession.
Yeah, yeah. And I just want to say that even that confusion of like, you didn't choose us, right? It's such a projection, and it's rooted in trauma. It's such it's it's a belief that is rooted in trauma. It's such a belief that is rooted in trauma. And I mean, and I wonder how much of it has to do with, this generational trauma that also exists within our lineage and everything. But um, oh my gosh, I forgot your question, Yasmin.
No worries. Diaspora, not, you just spoke to the choice, right? That it's not, it is or isn't a choice, but the fact that
Right,
we were dispossessed, we're talking about dispossession, we're talking about displacement, that either
right.
we ourselves suffered, like, for example, the people who are forced to leave here.
Yeah,
Hay muchos que
exactly that.
nacieron aquí that are now
Exactly
part of
that.
the diaspora because they're
Right,
forced out via displacement.
right.
So that
Absolutely.
this displacement and dispossession is being structural, as being
Mm-hmm.
beyond a
Mm-hmm.
choice that we make. And we're not selling out, we're not
Right, right.
defecting.
We're not
We're being
abandoning, we're not
pushed
defecting.
to this. Yeah.
Yes. And I appreciate you bringing that back. So thank you. Because I'm like, I want to say so many things about that. I think about my grandfather. I think about the choice that the choice. right? Because even with people that were born and raised on the island who choose to leave, people will say you chose to leave, but it's not really a choice. It's not really a choice when they're forced to leave and forced to make the decision that they have to go because they're tired of living without electricity sometimes, right? Because of the infrastructure in Puerto Rico, or because, you know, they have children, folks have children that are special needs, and Puerto Rico doesn't have the services to provide this. And so they say, well, we're going to have to go to the United States because that's where we're probably going to have more of a chance to find something. Not that the United States, medical system is like cream of the crop, because it isn't either. It's trash. But there are some positive things that we certainly have in terms of, privilege in the United States that Puerto Rico doesn't have. And so, my grandfather made that choice to go to New York because of financial reasons. He wanted to be able to provide for his wife, my grandma at the time. And so they moved at like 15, 16 to New York. They moved at 15, 16 as a couple to New York. And that's where they hunkered down. And my grandparents lived in the Lower East Side, Manhattan, in the projects, New York City Housing Authority, right? Public housing. And that's where we were, right? We weren't living in castles. They were living in they were in the lucha still. They were in the lucha still. There was no white picket fence, right? There was no white picket fence. Instead, there was racial profiling by police and gunshots often, because we were living in an area, where there was a lot of just violence. And so that's where my grandparents were. But they didn't choose from a rooted place of yes, I want to abandon my island. My grandfather now, who's still alive at 95, I think.
Wow.
At 95, thank you. At 95, cries about coming back. He cries about coming back to his home. And he's even said to me, Yasmin, on I think it was over the phone. He shared with me, yo te envidio, because I'm home, right? I'm home. And all he wants to do is come back home. He never wanted to leave. He just had to leave so that he could make enough means to support the family that he wanted to build for himself. We're not defectors. We're forced to go and find a temporary home somewhere else. But Puerto Rico doesn't leave us. Puerto Rico calls our elders home every day.
It calls us even when we're not elders.
Absolutely.
It calls us. It'll call us
Absolutely.
home. I absolutely describe it as a call. I thought I would return here as an elder. I thought I would retire here in a distant future. Fue así. It was just like the time has come, you're moving, y ya está. Let's go back to the body, because I hear this story about your grandfather and I think about el duelo, like this deep, deep grief that we walk with when we are outside of this place, and that we also walk with when we are inside of this place, seeing the conditions that are lived here. And so some of the other notes that I took from, what you presented is colonization as embedded in the body, and then this resulting anxiety and hypervigilance that we live with on a daily basis. So if you could talk a little to that, like using now your expertise and the way that you work, because we all live this no matter what we do, right? But in terms of your specific work as a therapist and helping folks navigate that anxiety, that hypervigilance, which could come from life on Earth, but that is its double duty and layered, being from a people colonized and displaced?
I feel like there are so many ways, there are so many reflex responses that we have that are rooted in the historical trauma of our ancestors that were colonized, of our land that was colonized. So I'm sharing for myself and then what I've seen with my clients as well. For myself, I have to say that one of my biggest triggers are this fear that someone is going to steal from me, that someone's going to steal from me, and not necessarily objects per se, but like are going to steal, like let's say my intellectual property or steal an idea or something like that. And maybe it is a little bit property, but I don't know. For some reason, it's less so about like an insignificant bonking. But I've had to do a lot of work around that, around like the fear of being stolen from. Or like for another example is I never used to feel afraid of death before. Like before I had kids, I never used to feel afraid of death. And then I had kids, and now it feels like the biggest thing that the biggest fear that I have is around like my kids are going to be taken from me. My kids are going to be taken from me. They're going to be taken from me. They're going to be taken, whether something's going to happen to them or they're going to be kidnapped. And that is consistently running. Like those are two big, triggers, real triggers for me, Yasmin. And when I sit with why that is, I know that not all of it is that someone stole from me, because no one is really taken from me, like intellectually. No one's really, I mean, maybe that happens or whatever, but it hasn't really happened, right? But it feels like it happened for lifetimes. In the same way that like this real rooted, innate, visceral fear about my kids being taken from me, I know that a lot of it comes from this ancestral experience, this historical, the remnants of historical trauma of our people being taken, our children being taken, our land being taken from us. When we talk about the body, it's important that we also recognize that the earth, right, that we are an extension of the earth. And so we are part of the body of the earth, right? And so the earth's grief is actually our grief, and our grief is the earth's grief. And so when we understand that, like on a soul level, when we understand like we're not just, like we are genuinely part of the earth, and our ancestors knew that. Our ancestors know that there is no separation between us and the earth, that we're part of it. And that's the importance of that right relationship, and not seeing ourselves separate from the land, right? So the first, when we think about like attachment wounding in relationships, right? Attachment wounding, like in the psychology world, is the understanding that, we have attachment styles, whether we either feel secure with our caregivers or our parents, or we feel insecure if they like hurt us, or if they hurt us, if they abandon us, if they neglect us, then we develop this insecure attachment style. But when we even think about that, right, like the stories of our parents continues to go back. And again, we meet what has been alive within our lineages around what our ancestors have had to forcibly endure. That the original attachment wound is really our ancestors being taken from their home land, or the land being taken from them, right? That we could actually see that as the original attachment wound, not what our parents did or didn't do, but what happened what was the original rupture? What was the original trauma in all of this? And it's that separation between our lands and our bodies. I want to pause because I know I've said a lot.
I as I'm listening to you, I continue to think that it doesn't help that we are witnessing every day in real time, whether with our own
That
eyes
too.
or on
Right.
social media or on the news, people being taken every day, right? And
Exactly.
there is this very strange way that we are connected to our kin right now, because one of the things that has
Hmm.
troubled me for so long is how Puerto Ricans, because of this US citizenship that was imposed, would see themselves as distinct from so-called immigrants because of this so-called privilege, right? But there is so much that is revealed about how our experiences are the same. So when citizens started being detained and even deported, or they're working
Hmm.
more on those. And so this, it's like when we speak about triggers, right? So I love what you bring about this initial wound, this inherent wound. We may not
Hmm.
have lived if we grew up in New York or Florida or Philadelphia or Chicago as Puerto Ricans or elsewhere. We may not have lived that initial wound of watching our lands be taken away. But as recent as just a generation ago, perhaps people living that in Vieques, right, and being dispossessed of their
Yes.
lands in the 1940s, and now
Right.
here we are witnessing this happen again, witnessing the remilitarization,
Hmm.
witnessing the detainment of people, the separation of families, the deportation of people at ni se sabe dónde. Some people are being deported
Uh-huh.
to places they're not even from. And so
Right.
this is a very uh, delicate time to be living, because we may not realize all those triggers, all those like sort of you said before that these things are like in the blood, that they're in the
Hmm.
cells, ¿verdad? Like, can you speak about that process of how this gets wakened up in us, something that we are not even
Oh,
consciously aware of?
yeah. Like going back to those triggers, right? Like it hasn't happened to me. I have not been stolen from in that way. My ancestors have been stolen from. Absolutely. There's something about the body remembering. And I think part of it has to do with, there is this scientific, I'll just call it the scientific understanding research that's been done about epigenetics. And what that means is that when we are living within a toxic system, right, a violent system, or any just traumatic kind of environment, we are wired to want to survive that. And so there will be parts of us, like on a cellular level, on a genetic level, that will be modified to want to survive that very thing. And then after that's done, we pass down that genetic um, modification to the next generation. And it just keeps being passed down for us to survive because we are wired to want to survive. And so part of that cellular memory is that on a cellular level, you are being negatively impacted. And that continues to be passed down throughout the generations.
Mm. Thank you for sharing that. Thank you for sharing that. Before, we start to wrap up, I want to just learn about, because you've shared a lot of knowledge and your personal experience of what your work is based in terms of what you've seen with some of the folks you've worked with. But I just want you to share more about these books, about the services that you offer, either in person or stuff via your website, where people could find you, what are ways that you are in service with others. I know that you've traveled a lot as well. But what are the ways? Because a lot of us will be in therapists or we'll be going to a therapist's office, but not everybody's talking about this colonial context. Not everybody's
Right,
talking about the systemic context, right? And so it's
right,
important
right.
to have this be brought to the work. So how are you incorporating this into your work, and how can people reach out to you if they wanted to work with you directly?
Mm-hmm. Yasmin, can I just say speak to what you just said right now because it feels so important. Not everyone is talking about this in the therapy space, and also not every therapist is bringing it in. because I think a lot of therapists that are trained in the Western model see the individual in front of them and just, you know, diagnose the individual. Oh, you have anxiety, or you have disorder, or you have bipolar, or blah, 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 whatever it is. And they give them a label, either pues ya. Then it's, you know, without really understanding the story and the story before their story and the individual, including what you brought in before, what is happening systemically, what is happening right now in your environment, right? Because environmental factors affect everything in the now, right? It's part of what has also contributed to generational trauma in our own lineages alongside historical trauma. So it's important, right, that even in the therapy space, that you are also advocating for yourself, that, you know, this isn't really like, this isn't just about me, but like, let's also explore what's happening around us, because what is it, or how does it impact us when we are seeing other people be bombed? Yes, I may not be Iranian, but it impacts me, because so much of the time we see on TV, and it's not just even what we see on TV, but what we know to be true, is that Black and brown people and indigenous people are targeted all around the world all of the time. And that impacts us. That's vicarious trauma. So it may not be happening to us right now, but it has happened to us at some point. Puerto Rico has been bombed by the United States at some point, right? There was the sterilization that has happened to women in Puerto Rico, that we were science experiments to the United States, right? So like, these things have happened, and we carry this as well. And so when we see it happening to other people, it's going to activate that ancestral wound within us. So just want to say that, right? And I think it's really important that therapists are also doing their due diligence in making sure that they are not just treating the individual that is there in front of them, but they're really seeing the bigger picture. They're really actually providing a holistic frame and container for their clients, because anything other than that is incomplete. Anything other than that, you're not really doing a service to your client. You're just dealing with this much of the problem. I want to say so much of the anxiety and the depression that our people carry is rooted in things that are beyond their control, that are really just reactions to the systems in which we live in right now. And to me, it's important that we're not pathologizing the people and how they're responding and reacting to all of these things, but more of like doing something about the actual problem, which is colonialism, right? Racism, all of the isms that exist in our society today. So that is essentially why I wrote my book. That is why I wrote my book, because I wanted both therapists and also non-therapists to read the book and to feel seen, and also to educate on like, yes, you're feeling shame. Yes, you're feeling this sadness. And is it possible? Is it possible that we can see things a little bit differently? That all of this is coming from outside of you? That this is actually a natural reaction to being oppressed. This is a natural reaction to living and witnessing so many hard things in the world, right? Even something so simple as imposter syndrome is that actually rooted in internalized racism, because we were never meant or wanted to come to be at the table, at the same table of white folks and people in power that have created this racial and power construct, right? That we are trying to heal from and also trying to navigate. So that is the root of my work. My work is for people of the global majority. I don't have time to educate the white people. My work, I mean, and I will in certain situations, but my work is really dedicated and I'm committed to supporting people of the global majority, Black, Indigenous, brown people, in healing from all that's been put on them, all that's been put on us. And that always includes interrogating within us how systems live within us, right? Because systems aren't just brick and mortar buildings or institutions, they're also how we show up, right? I have internalized the system, and I have to check myself every day to see how that still lives within me. All of us do, no matter what shade we are.
Sure. Thank you so
And
much for sharing that.
I hold circles both in person and virtually. Right now, it's more virtually. Um, I hold affinity circles, so we are talking about these things. We're talking a lot about the burdens and the pain that we carry in these virtual healing circles. And I also offer retreats, some of that I've done in Puerto Rico, and some that I'm also currently going to be doing. One in July in Colombia. I want to be doing more healing circles in Puerto Rico, so stay tuned with that. Group work is really important to me. I think individual work is also very valuable, but meeting in community and having these really sacred and important conversations, I think is where we need to be at this moment.
Thank you so much. Before you go, I need you to share what your website is, and I could also post it in the description of this video. But what are your websites, your social media handles, so that people know how to reach you and how to find info about your work?
Thank you. So my website is www.nataliegutierrez.com. Excuse me. And my Instagram handle is Natalie Gutiérrez, LMFT. And I have a Substack, but I will eventually start posting there. But if folks want to stay connected, they can certainly join my newsletter and my bio on my website and stay connected.
I would like, if you would allow, there are 3 questions that you threw out in our space that people could reflect on and journal on. Would it be okay for me to share those, that if people listening
Please.
wanted to continue? And also, I urge you to look up Natalie's books if you wanted to go deeper with the work. But I think this is so important to self-reflect. And these are the 3 questions that I left your space with. What does home look like? And I think that this could be on so many levels. What does home look like in our bodies? What does home look like in terms of homeland, in terms of coming back, in terms of where we are standing right now?
Yeah.
How does home feel without occupiers?
Mm-hmm.
That idea of envisioning what it is that we're wanting, not just complaining all the time of the shit we need to change, but just envisioning what it is that we are wanting, what it is we are deserving. I love that. And the last one was, how does home feel in the body? So I wanted to share those. Those are not mine. Those were for Natalie. As homework, if folks wanted to listen and continue this work of just envisioning and feeling this in their own bodies and starting to have these considerations for ourselves and the collective. Thank you. Thank you for your generosity.
Thank you, Yasmin.
Thank
Thank
you
you.
for driving with your babies from Humacao all the way to Mayaguez. That, for those who do not know, are 2 and opposite extremes of this island of Borikén. Thank you to your partner for coming and holding it down with them, and for everyone just being so supportive of this space of CucubaNación and just taking this work to the people, wherever the people are. I've seen all you've traveled, of sharing your slides and information with folks on social media, of making this work available via your books, and just wanting people to have access to these tools. Thank you so much. Mille de
No, thank
bendiciones
you.
in your
Gracias.
work, in
Muchas
what you
gracias.
do.
Thank you for birthing this space. Thank you for
My
birthing this
pleasure.
space. This is so needed. So I appreciate you so much. Thank you.
Thank you. We will continue to be in touch and collaborate.
Absolutely.
Thank
Absolutely.
you. Cuídate mucho y mil gracias por esto.
Igual. Fuerte abrazo.
Igual. Take good care.
Thank you so much for listening. You can tune into future episodes every new and full moon. For more information about the project Rematriating Borikén, you can visit rematriatingborikén.com. That's Rematriating with an M and Borikén with K-E-N. Please give a like and a share. If you want updates for future posts, subscribe to this channel on YouTube. And thank you again so much for listening. In light always.